keep going. You are in the room that is the continuation of road user charging as the topic, just in case you're not in the right room. Otherwise, welcome, come on in. I'm going to get going straight away, and I'd like to introduce our first speaker in this session. That is Michael Roth from Auckland Council. Welcome, Michael.
What Auckland Council's been doing as part of our progression of the time of use charging system. There won't be anything too new. I've only got 15 minutes, so it's just going to be a quick update. I'll go through the background very briefly, cover a lot of territory, so come talk with me later if you've got questions. First point with any system change is you really got to identify what the problem is that you're addressing. The fortunate thing for us is everyone acknowledges congestion is a problem in Auckland. So we don't really have to argue the case about what the problem is. As long as we focus on congestion, there's a lot of understanding that it is a problem that needs addressing. There will obviously be disagreement about what's the best solution. Why time of use charging? Many of you will know it as congestion charging, but I think the terminology has been pretty well socialised, including the session this morning. When you look at our infrastructure strategy, it's a point that was also made this morning by Shamobile. We're good at building, kind of good at building infrastructure. We have gotten much better in recent years with planning, but there's a real gap with demand management and also optimisation of our existing system. It's in council strategy, it's in the Infrastructure Commission, it's pretty standard, but demand management optimisation are kind of harder to do, and you don't necessarily get the rewards from ribbon cutting and so forth. So we really need to try to push for more focus on these because they deliver a much better bang for buck. Time of use charging, so it's congestion charging. It's about charging certain roads when traffic is high, getting people to pay a fee to use those roads. So in some ways, some will consider it a new tax. Selling a tax is not an easy thing to do, so we have to be very careful with how we frame this, how we discuss it, and how we deal with the process of engaging the community and maintaining political support. That's a key challenge. There are different ways people respond. Some will respond by driving at a different time, some will drive to a different destination, some will avoid the trip, some will take public transport, some will ride a bike or walk instead, carpool and the like. So there are many ways around it. So in that sense, we're not a tax. You can avoid paying in many circumstances. And of course, those who do pay will get a better level of service for it. They will save time by not being stuck in as much congestion, which of course means they save fuel. So they can get some of that money back. And the big thing that we have to work out how to sell is the travel time reliability. It's hard to measure, but if we can get people to understand that this makes their journeys a lot more reliable, I think that will be critical. Of course, it does other things. There are many co-benefits, including the emissions reduction, better productivity, public health, and the like. Many will have seen this before. This is essentially Council's objective and principles. We're really about managing demand, and our principles are about effective, fair, simple, and feasible. We're trying to keep it to that. That's covering the bases. It needs to be effective. It needs to work. It needs to be fair. Our councillors will not vote for it if they don't perceive that we're pretty fair, and that's hard for a charge. It needs to be simple. People need to understand it, otherwise they struggle to support it. And of course, it needs to be feasible, which essentially means it meets all the others. Big thing that's happened since last year's conference is, of course, government passed the Land Transport Management Time of Use Charging Amendment Act. That happened in November. Of course, government put a year's delay before the legislation takes up, possibly because there's an election in early November. So we are currently working within council and of course now with NZTA, with the Ministry, with Auckland Transport and with other stakeholders in progressing our aspects to ready us to put in a scheme bid or scheme initiation. But the legislation's very clear on the process. It's a lot of process we need to follow. The purpose, fortunately, is the same as ours. It's about improving traffic flow, network productivity. Council has to propose a scheme initiation, so we have to define the area that we think it's going to work in, and then a scheme board takes over. Now that scheme board is done between Council and NZTA with an independent chair. The detail on that will be critical to successful schemes because that scheme board has control over all the detail in the proposal, exactly what charges are applicable at whatever times, and of course including the public consultation and impact analysis that has to happen with the detailed design. Then that scheme board makes a proposal back to Council. If Council ratifies the proposal, then it goes to the Minister for final approval. So importantly for Council, it has a say in ratifying a scheme after it's designed by the scheme board. That will hopefully give our councillors confidence to allow the scheme board to do the detailed work, and knowing that if they're not comfortable with it in the end, they have a chance to stop it. And hopefully it'll keep a focus on the social licence that we need to get this implemented. The revenue raised all goes back to land transport within the area of the scheme for travel within, to and adjacent to the scheme, which is really important. It'll be part of the narrative around why this is a good thing. But there are details within an investment agreement that will be finalised after the scheme gets put together. The most recent thing that's happened in this space is national time use charge regulations that were put out by the Ministry. It was fairly simple in a sense. Ministry just wanted to classify the vehicle types and the different charge multiples that those vehicles would have to pay, and also the infringement system and payments. Council put in a submission. It was quite hotly debated within the Transport Committee. The details of our submission, I won't go into too much detail other than saying we've pushed back to the Ministry on the setting of national charge ratios. We're saying, well, the issues that we face in Auckland may be different to what's in Wellington or Queenstown, for instance. So a truck or a bus maybe shouldn't have to pay the same multiple of a car in all cases. And we've also told the Ministry if they do want to really set that multiple nationally, then they should perhaps reduce the multiple for heavy vehicles, because that multiple is prescribed as 4. We think that's a little bit high. It'll get the more in the trucking sector opposed to the scheme, and their stakeholders we'd rather have on board. That's detail. You can read all the submissions, but it did highlight for us that politically this will be quite a process to go through. Where there's also some issues around motorcycles, mopeds. Some suggest that it might be best to leave them out of the scheme because they're not going to earn much revenue and they take up less space, and also sometimes their number plates are hard to read. Little bit on what we've been doing. Phase 1 findings, they're all on the AT website. If you search Auckland Transport, time of use charging, you'll find a lot of detail in there if you click through the different reports. We've been doing more modelling since, just looking at different charge levels, different areas, and looking at the detail of who benefits. Are the people benefiting the same ones that are paying the charge? Who's saving more fuel? Who's saving the most time, and so forth, to get a better handle on which options make most sense for Auckland. And we've also been looking at what we call complementary measures. That's things like, well, what public transport services do we need to improve so more people have that viable alternative? That's going to be a key issue on the equity side of things. We need to make sure public transport is good enough for enough trip alternatives. So for those who know Auckland, this is a list of the areas that we're kind of focusing on in our shortlisting. We're looking at the smallest scheme option is option 1A is kind of city centre motorways, just the city centre. But we acknowledge that is much smaller than the other schemes around the world. There's a small expansion of that, which we call city centre and fringes. This includes Newmarket, could also include Parnell. There's another cordon model that we've looked at. We're calling a double cordon, which has a city centre and a cordon around the Green Lane Boundary Road area. We're leaning a little bit against that at the moment because there's a lot of complexity around that boundary, but the traffic impacts do look good with that scheme. And then we've got some motorway options. There's just charging the inner city segments of the three main motorways. That's 3B. There's incorporating those motorways with a city centre cordon. That makes a little bit more sense because it reduces the diversion onto the arterials that run a bit more parallel to the motorways. And then there were some spot charges on the motorway a little bit further out, which we're not too keen on anymore. I'll just show you a little bit of detail around what the modelling's saying for that. You've got the 6 options across the top. 3C is my preferred option, so not council preferred, my preferred. So that's the core motorways and the city centre cordon. And you can see in this measure, that charges the greatest number of trips, but it's only 9% of the trips in Auckland. So we're charging less than 10% of all trips. And really only 1% of trips are totally avoided. So in an Auckland-wide sense, even the biggest scheme is not massive. You look at the smallest scheme, city centre, we're only charging 3% of trips roughly from the Auckland region. Public transport demand increases with all of them about 3 to 4% for the best performing, down to smaller numbers. But public transport does take some of the load, obviously not all of the load. But to us, this is important. It demonstrates how many people will be charged, roughly what the impacts will be. When you look at that in a speed sense, I don't really like these numbers because they're regional, whereas we're really talking about proper urban part of Auckland. So we really should bring it back onto a smaller scale. But even across the region, on the best performing measures, we're getting 3 to 4% improvement in average speeds across the region, which is quite substantial. 3 to 4% doesn't sound like a big number, but that's that's about 20 years worth of traffic growth. So that's quite a big improvement, better than what any road can do. And roads, of course, cost a lot more to build than what we're doing, and roads don't make revenue unless you've got time use charging on them. Benefits bigger in AM peak than PM peak because PM peak is more dispersed, but benefits do come across the day. It's important for us to focus also on equity, and in particular, low-income people, and because there's a big perception that there's a lot of relatively poor people who will be forced to pay because they've got less flexibility with work and the like. So that's a critical design component for our scheme. It'll determine to a large extent where the scheme is, what time it's charged and the like. This is just a little example of what we've done. We've just looked at the percent of low-income people and where they're coming from in the different scheme options. You can see for the city centre scheme, it's only low-income people in the city centre who are having to pay. And that's a good thing because they've got good alternatives. Whereas 3E, just the motorway hotspots, which is the most removed from the city centre, you can see that the low-income people that have been caught up are dispersed across much more of Auckland, including down the south and the west. That's a bigger problem to manage. So this kind of impact assessment or social assessment relating to equity is an important aspect of the design. There are many other aspects of that we are looking at. Our next phase of work is doing more modelling to give us a better understanding of which scheme area should be put forward, and also will help us be able to explain to people, well, how much is the charge likely to be, what are the impacts likely to be, what are the benefits likely to be, how much public transport will we possibly be able to fund out of this revenue? That's happening at the moment. We're also working closely with NZTA. The legislation gives NZTA control over the technology platform, essentially the gantries, the back office, the customer front. So NZTA and Council and AT have to work closely together to make sure the time of use charging system works well. It could be based on the NZTA's existing tolling system, but they could also choose a different approach. At the moment, we're working on making sure that the functionality is there for us. Our intention, as Councillor Andy Baker mentioned this morning, is to take our options analysis back to Transport Infrastructure Delivery Committee for their late August meeting, and in that meeting discuss with them our preferred shortlist options and our approach to public engagement, which we're hoping to do just before the end of the year. That's the intention. Of course, that depends on what the councillors choose to do. So that's not set in stone yet. But we are hoping to do the first rounds of public engagement just before the end of the year to allow scheme initiation to happen early next year, and then the scheme board will be doing the large amount of work to develop all the details and do the formal bit of consultation sometime, mid-late 2027. So that's the process from here. We're still a fair way away from implementation, because, I'm not talking about building the scheme yet. This is just part of the design process. And I always like to finish on this slide. We heard a bit about it this morning from Scott Wilson and others. Scott mentioned it as a mountain to climb. I think of it as a gully to try to get through. We're really up the top. We still have sufficient support to proceed, but as we get closer to implementation, as we get closer to actually imposing a charge on people who currently use the roads for free, well, that's how they feel, the more we will have stakeholders and public start to oppose us. So we have to work out how to get through that gully. We have to make sure our timing and our process doesn't force politicians into a difficult position when we're near the bottom of that gully. Because we know, based on the international schemes, once it's up and running and people understand how it works, that support will build. So that's it from us.
I'm just going to keep us to time, so we'll do questions at the panel session at the end of this. Keep sending them through on Slido and upvote questions you really want to hear. I'd now like to welcome Marcus Russold to the stage from CAT for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So, good afternoon, everybody. What a lovely winter weather you're having today. I'm Marcus Russold, Vice President of Global Sales Enablement in our tolling division at Capsch Trafficom. Capsch is a family-owned tolling and traffic company headquartered in Vienna, Austria, which is where I've flown to you from. And before you ask, yes, I am from the same place as Arnold Schwarzenegger, and yes, I might sound a little bit like him. At Capsch, our mission is to create innovative transportation solutions for sustainable mobility, enabling people to arrive at their destination conveniently, on time, efficiently, and with minimal environmental impact. We are a publicly listed company and brought in about €500 million in revenue last year. Capsch Trafficom has subsidiaries in about 25 countries worldwide, with successful projects in more than 50 countries. Most of you have probably already experienced a Capsch solution, because from here it's just a short drive up to Warkworth along the Northern Gateway, a tolling system designed and delivered by Capsch. We don't just sit on our laurels, however. Today, I'm here to introduce what we at Capsch are hard at work developing: holistic toll capture, or HOTCAP for short. HOTCAP is being built to address revenue loss, manual validation costs, and leaner roadside deployments. Whether you're looking at deploying a lean roadside or already operating large-scale infrastructure, HotCap brings artificial intelligence and data-driven intelligence into your system in the form of a smart layer, helping you capture more revenue, reduce operational effort, and future-proof your tolling strategy. At its core, HotCap is about one idea: tolling should be smarter, not harder. I'd like to start with a couple of simple questions. How would you like to capture the maximum amount of revenue, lower operational costs, extend the life and value of your current infrastructure, or build a high-performing tolling system with a lean footprint from the start? HotCap has been designed to enable all of this. It is a smart, AI-powered, data-driven tolling solution, either as an enhancement layer on top of existing systems or as a foundation for lean, high-performance roadside setups. In both cases, the outcome is the same: more efficiency and more revenue where it matters most. Across the tolling industry, we see recurring challenges. First, revenue leakage continues to impact margins. Second, manual validation processes are costly and slow. Third, setup and expansion of large roadside footprints can be expensive, complex, and difficult to scale. For operators with existing systems, expanding coverage or improving performance often requires significant investments. For those building new systems, infrastructure costs and physical footprint can quickly become limiting factors. So the question becomes, how do you improve performance and extend your system without adding complexity or significant costs? Historically, the answer to that question has been to upgrade equipment or upgrade a system. But that approach is reaching its limits. Why? Our multi-lane free-flow systems and their hardware already have excellent indicators. Continuing to replace equipment wouldn't move the needle drastically. Manual processes, which in our case is manual validation of images, are expensive to maintain and slow to scale. And increasing complexity does not necessarily translate into increased efficiency. Many systems are already highly accurate, but still lose revenue due to matching issues, edge cases, or inefficiencies in processing. The key idea here is that we don't necessarily need different equipment. We need smarter systems. We need intelligence, not bulk. And this is exactly where HotCap jumps to the rescue. HotCap introduces an AI-driven intelligence layer that works across your tolling setup. By combining the all-enabling technology of vehicle fingerprinting, ANPR reads, GNSS, and tag data, time, date, and historical data into our proprietary passage fusion, we create a reliable data foundation. And based on said foundation, our highly efficient algorithms are able to produce high-confidence transactions across multiple tolling points, even from less than perfect images. What do I mean with less than perfect? I'm talking about smudged license plates, occlusions like larger vehicles blocking the camera's view, sleet, hail, and any other adverse conditions that makes identification difficult for both human and machines. HotCap is positioned to tackle all of this and eliminate edge cases before they even reach human eyes. The result is a smart back-office experience for smooth operations, better financial performance, and scalable growth. So let's talk at how this plays out in practice. HotCap allows you to enhance your system using AI-based analytics and vehicle fingerprinting. For an existing operator, it enhances what you already have without disruptions and with the optional additional roadside hardware if you'd like to add a road segment. It improves matching accuracy and reduces leakage. It optimizes manual validation, fewer edge cases, plus higher confidence equals less work for operators. For less deployments, it enables coverage of more road segments with less infrastructure, stretches your initial investment capital further, and in general, gives you more bang for your buck. When we talk about new deployments, HotCap enables a completely different approach to system design with a smaller physical footprint, with fewer roadside elements, while maintaining the high performance that CAPS is very well known for. No matter your tolling setup or goals, we are unblocking value either from what you already have or from what you choose to build. For existing customers, we have an analysis proposition. Provide us with your roadside data, of course, anonymized and compliant, and we will process it using our smart algorithms. We then simulate improvements and identify exactly where you can increase revenue capture. At the end of the exercise, you'll get dashboards like this with real insights into the value that a smart layer in the form of HotCap can bring to your setup. However, let's address the elephant in the room, adoption. HotCap has been designed to be fast, simple, and of low risk. It does not require new sensors because HotCap is hardware agnostic. It can use existing infrastructure and data or a new lean roadside installation. Advanced identification, like vehicle fingerprinting, which I have already mentioned, can happen either in the back office or at the roadside, according to your particular setup. Intelligence is centralized in software, and you can start small and scale easily. At the end of the day, you get actionable insights to increase revenue and unlock additional insights over time as historical data increases. The key takeaway is that HotCap is designed to work with your system as it currently stands. The impact is both operational and financial. HotCap delivers increased revenue capture, reduced manual review effort, and high transaction confidence. This directly translates into improved efficiency and ROI on existing investments, while also enabling significantly lower hardware and maintenance costs for new setups, as well as flexible, pain-free scaling through software. So, whether you're optimizing or building from scratch, you'll see financial benefits both immediately and over time. Finally, let's talk about the journey forward. HotCap supports incremental adoption as it does not disrupt existing operations, works with current architectures, and provides step-by-step enhancement. At the same time, it enables a future-ready approach that supports lighter system designs, adapts to evolving mobility ecosystems, and opens the door to deeper data insights. In short, you can improve today while preparing for tomorrow. So, to summarize, HotCap helps you to reduce leakage and increase revenue capture, lower operational costs, enhance existing systems or enable lean deployments, and build a path toward future-ready tolling. All of this is achieved by shifting the focus from hardware-heavy systems to intelligence-driven systems. So, where do we go from here? I invite you to come by our booth to explore pilot opportunities with your data, to assess the impact on your particular system, identify real measurable savings and performance gains, and develop and design new tolling setups with us that were previously not viable. So please come by our booth if you are interested in further discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Again, we're going to take questions in the panel session at the end, so keep sending those through and upvoting them on the Slido. I now have great pleasure introducing Lance Brand from Q-Free Australia, who's going to speak to us today on driving sustainable mobility through distance-based road user charging. Thank you.
Thanks so much. My name's Lance. I'm from Q3, a global ITS solutions provider. I'm based across the ditch in Sydney, and I'd be so lucky if I could lift as much weight or sound like Arnie. The need for a road user charging solution needs no introduction to people in New Zealand and indeed this audience. At the same time, we have issues with congestion that need to be resolved. It's often seen as a separate issue requiring a separate technological solution, but it doesn't need to be the case. Regardless of what technology is used, it can be agreed that a road user charging system can provide greater fairness and revenue for roads development in comparison to a declining fuel tax-based system. That establishes the need for road user charging. The question is how. Existing road user charging systems implemented elsewhere in the world are typically designed for heavy vehicles, and they're too costly, too complex, and too intrusive to scale for private car use. You're talking about units that are expensive off the manufacturing line. They are too complex they involve professional installation wired into the vehicle's power supply, typically integrated into the vehicle's telematics and information systems. And they involve significant operational overhead designed for truck fleets, and they're not designed to scale for millions of private vehicles. On top of that, we have the issues of surveillance, data misuse, and data privacy. And of course, a lot has been mentioned in previous sessions about social license. Yes, America, we do have a thing called social license here. The issues, I see a number of issues with data privacy. It's not just about the case of convincing road users that this is a fairer system and they'll just let it slide. The first issue I want to point out is New Zealand's information privacy principles. There are 13 principles involved in that. Principle number 10 says that that the information that is collected by a provider should only be collected for the purpose that it is intended for. So yes, you may need to collect GPS coordinates to determine where a vehicle travelled, but you shouldn't use it for road planning. The second principle, principle number 1, suggests that if you don't need to collect that data, then you shouldn't collect that data. Keep that in mind. So, sustainable mobility to Q3 means that we have a solution that involves fair usage-based funding, a solution that is scalable with future-ready technologies enabling mass adoption, a solution that has privacy by design. It is a solution that can also be extended to reduce congestion and to provide cleaner, safer, and more efficient fleet operations. If we have a look at the various trials of different technological solutions for road user charging, I won't go through all of these, but I wanted to identify just a few in this talk. Odometer readings, there is, seems to be the simplest, but there is an increase even being reported in the UK most recently of even electric vehicles being clocked in order to misrepresent the amount of kilometres being travelled. So it's not just a problem that's restricted to analogue odometers of the past. We have smartphones. There's if we have a look at a recent trial in Denmark that's been completed there, that was completed using smartphones. The problem there is that it requires a lot of user involvement, ensuring that the app is working, that it's actually on the phone, that the phone is inside the vehicle, that the phone is charged, and then involvement before and after the actual trip. So much so that financial incentives were actually required to keep the volunteers of that trial on board. And if we have a look at the OBD port and the OEM cloud solutions, for an OBD solution, you would need to test with 300 vehicles just to cover 90% of the fleet in New Zealand. And probably if we look at the different unique kinds of vehicle telematic systems that are represented in New Zealand, you would need somewhere between 20 agreements with manufacturers just to cover some 80–90% of New Zealand's fleet, up to 35 different agreements with manufacturers just to cover close to 100% of New Zealand's fleet. So Q-Free has addressed this using a unique road user charging solution. Let's have a look.
Charging 2.0 is changing how we pay for using roads. Instead of tolls, it uses distance-based fees, so people who drive less pay less. Designing a new solution for road user charging has been challenging. It must comply with strong privacy principles, have low cost, simple installation, and long battery life. We are now seeing results of extensive research and development projects. The new solution addresses these challenges and looks like traditional tolling tags that consumers are used to. There are no cables, simple installation, and the battery life is several years depending on driving. The device calculates the driving distance inside as well as outside geo-fenced zones. At regular intervals, only the accumulated distances are transferred to the operator for fee calculation. Time and place are deliberately not included in the dataset for the operator. The details are only stored locally in the device, such that only the driver can access personal information. The driver can validate the invoice by requesting the detailed driving history from the device. Any discrepancies can be resolved with customer support. The device contains a positioning module with sensor fusion, a DSRC tolling module, a cellular modem for data transfer, and finally a storage device for keeping driving history private. Roadside equipment does traditional tolling transactions and distance-based compliance checks to validate the integrity of the device in accordance with European regulations and standards. If any discrepancies are found, enforcement action can be taken. When entering a tunnel, the position is recovered at the exit, and the distance is added to the distance calculation. With easy installation, fair pricing, and compatibility with existing infrastructure, Road User Charging 2.0 is redefining the road ahead for smarter, cleaner, and safer mobility.
So the road user charging solution charges private cars, I should say, by distances and zones. It's a solution suitable for modern car fleets, for all different kinds of models of vehicles. It's developed with a small battery-powered, easy-to-install tag and designed with privacy by default. One question that's often asked of us at Q-Free is, well, what kind of information is being disseminated to the road provider? Well, an example is shown here. The data is aggregated in the vehicle's positions, and only the summary data, which is grouped by charging zone and distance is sent to the road user charging operator for a given period of time. In addition, the solution is proven in real-world pilots starting in 2021 with the GeoFlow project and continuing with trials that will continue through this year and over the next couple of years, which I'll talk about shortly. It's a collaborative innovation. If you think about in New Zealand, the equivalent of Callaghan Innovation managing a project here in conjunction with University of Auckland, NZTA, Auckland Transport and Q-Free. And then think about the equivalent of those organisations in Norway. That's what is actually taking place now and over the next couple of years. So how accurate are these units that aren't actually integrated into the telematics of the vehicle? Q-Free's done a trial with one of these units and measured it against a $100,000 land equipment inside a land survey vehicle, and travelling over 30 kilometres, the difference between the two vehicles' recorded distances was only 3 metres. The pilot in Bergen commences late this year. And why Bergen? Well, it's Norway's second largest city. It's a very complex road network, and the city also has a large series of tall mountains and 900 tunnels, including roundabouts in the tunnels. So think about that, and you've only got a population 1/5 the size of Auckland. So if it works there, it's going to work anywhere. So we're going to start with a pilot of 300 vehicles in Bergen and 100 additional in Oslo this year, and then over the next couple of years an additional 3,000 vehicles being trialled in Norway. Based on the same technology, Q-Free has developed a fleet management solution that enables easy monitoring of the distance driven by the vehicle, tracking of safe driving behaviour, and smooth payment solutions across parking, road user charging, and tolling. And by using a simple tap of a card, drivers can switch between the data that's being disseminated to the fleet provider and that private information that's recorded in the vehicle. In conclusion, Q-Free's road user charging solution shows that RUC devices can be made for the mass market using a cost-efficient OBU, ease of use, a solution that has privacy by design, is scalable, is flexible, and then also includes an optional enforcement ability, so that when you have those poles on the roads that detect the vehicle as it goes past, that compliant vehicles don't even need to have their an image taken by a camera. A simple identification of the vehicle through a short-range transceiver is sufficient to identify that vehicle. But it is an optional piece of the puzzle. If you have any further questions about the road user charging OBU solutions capabilities, please feel free to contact me or ask a question at the end of the session. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lance. And now I'd like to welcome to the stage Adam Johnston from RUC on Rails, who's going to continue our session on road user charging before we switch to the panel session where you can have a bit of discussion based around the questions that have been sent through on Slido. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Adam Johnston, founder of RUC on Rails. I should probably start by acknowledging the obvious early. This is clearly a very experienced and veteran industry, and I may be one of the younger people speaking today. Depending on how you view that, I might either be seen as a fresh perspective on the future of New Zealand ruck, or I'm a friendly reminder that the ruck transition has been talked about for so long in this country that people who are now born in the early 2000s are beginning to get involved. For context, Ruck on Rails is a Dunedin startup focused purely on the light vehicle side of the ruck transition, and I think I'll also take the opportunity to clarify the company name here, as we get this question quite a lot. So we are not involved with trains or physical railway at all. A lot of our work has been with the general retail sector, looking at how general retailers such as supermarkets, dairies, and convenience stores can participate in the future ruck market. The technology and integrations we are focused on building and integrating now as we speak into the general retail POS and over-the-counter payment processing services is considered a rail, so our systems integrate with theirs. So that's where you get Ruck on Rails from. One thing that we have learned very quickly from working with the general retail sector on the upcoming ruck transition is that they are less interested in what today's ruck market research is showing, and they are much more interested in what the future light vehicle market research is showing about what future consumers will want and accept. They want to understand who the future ruck driver is, how they will behave, how they will pay, how best to engage them, and most importantly, when dealing with a Crown revenue product such as ruck, what the non-compliance risks are and how those risks can be reduced in the interests of revenue integrity. Revenue integrity matters for the ministry, it matters for future ruck providers, and if I'm being honest, it matters because I see the Director of Revenue sitting up there, and I would very much like our future e-ruck provider application to be accepted. So over the last 6 months, we have been researching the future light vehicle ruck market in depth. Before I get into our research, a quick disclaimer, this is our independent research, and as a startup, we don't claim our research to be completely flawless, so please don't take it as financial advice or anything like that. So our research work to date has included face-to-face surveying of 1,098 light vehicle drivers, the majority of them future ruck users. It has included behavioural data from our own platforms, search query analysis, and social media sentiment, but the most significant thing that we have undertaken is that we have also conducted dedicated fieldwork into non-compliant segments of the market and evasion behaviour that could affect the future light vehicle ruck transition. From that work, we have some interesting findings to share on what we are seeing as the biggest risks to the future light vehicle ruck compliance and how we can reduce those risks through engagement rather than enforcement. To condense our findings into this presentation, we believe that the simplest way to view non-compliance in the future light vehicle ruck market is to break it down into 3 specific driver segments: the neglectful driver, the reluctant driver, and the deliberate evader. Each creates a different kind of non-compliance risk, and each for very different reasons. The first segment is the neglectful driver, and to be clear about what I mean by neglectful, this is not necessarily a person trying to deliberately cheat the system, and as an industry, I think we need to be careful that we do not view this segment as such. This segment is the parent working 2 jobs, the overwhelmed student, the exhausted tradie, or the person who simply does not have the attention or capacity to monitor another vehicle compliance obligation. Importantly, this segment of non-compliance does not appear to be inherently anti-ruck. Our research points very clearly to a gap in the light vehicle market's understanding of the future ruck changes. When we asked light vehicle drivers about the future ruck transition, only 42% said they were fully aware of the move of all vehicles to ruck. 38% had seen headlines but did not know any details, and 20% had no idea ruck was expanding to light vehicles at all. So yes, it's clear that awareness exists, but the understanding of their future compliance obligations appears to be broad and shallow. And broad and shallow awareness of a future vehicle compliance system such as ruck is not ideal if the system relies on active driver behaviour in order to remain financially viable. Right now, the future ruck transition narrative is being framed as a compliance burden. Sadly, right now, I don't believe that anyone in this room is really the one setting the narrative framing. We believe that if we do not play a heavier engagement role now to help fill that narrative gap, the loudest in the room will fill it for us, and they already are. Across our social media analysis, we analysed 200 plus posts about the future ruck changes, tens of thousands of comments, and transcribed hundreds of videos and news clips. Of this, 68% of all online comments relating to the future ruck changes were negative, rising to 74% when weighted by comment volume. Cash grab was the most common term to describe the ruck changes on social media, followed by terms like scam, rip-off, and stealth tax. 92% of social media commentary either did not believe or was skeptical that fuel prices would actually fall once fuel excise is removed. We also found that 38% of comments carried at least one inaccurate claim. That matters because misinformation does not just create bad sentiment, we believe it creates neglect. If drivers believe the system is a cash grab, they are less likely to want to be compliant early. I think it's easy for us to sit here now and write off social media sentiment as an extremist segment of the market. But in a future ruck market involving all New Zealanders, these are our future drivers, and our lack of engagement is being filled with misinformation that risks creating non-compliant sentiment before the market has even opened. The second segment is the reluctant driver. This group is different. They generally know enough to understand what compliance obligations apply to them, but they are uncomfortable with how the future experience may be designed. When we asked drivers how much they would pay upfront for hardware that fully automates their ruck compliance, 34% said they would not pay anything. Equally, 34% would only pay up to $15, and a further 22% would only pay up to $30. So 90% capped their willingness to pay for compliance hardware at $30 or less. At the same time, 64% said they were uncomfortable with real-time GPS tracking, and 53% said they would not plug a physical electronic tracking device into their car's OBD port. So if you hear light vehicle drivers objecting to your future ruck product, we do not believe it is always because they reject the obligation of ruck itself. Often the objection is about cost, privacy, control, and trust. The same pattern appears in billing. 67% said they would completely refuse automatic billing if a provider could deduct money for ruck without their approval each time. When we asked why, the leading answer was actually not privacy, and it was not even a distrust about the handling of bank or card details. 48% said it was because they wanted to choose exactly when money leaves their account. So this is not a driver saying, I will never comply. That is more a driver saying, I do not want to lose control in order to be compliant. And that distinction matters. This also links back to the neglectful driver. The neglectful driver will fall out of compliance because they miss the moment. The reluctant driver may fall out of compliance because they delay the moment. But in both cases, we believe the system, if created right, does have a chance to re-engage them before enforcement should even be considered. So the question now becomes, how do we engage a driver before they become non-compliant? I've spoken to many companies about their approaches to this problem. One option is hardware, of course, an OBD dongle that reads the odometer or an OEM integration, feeds and tells the driver when they are running out. That can be clever, and I think it allows for highly accurate engagement. But as we have discovered in our research, hardware cost is a barrier, even if we believe it's low, and so are privacy concerns around telematics for future light vehicle drivers. At the other end, you could take a fully analog approach. We have seen a rise in vehicle management apps that help people keep track of vehicle compliance. Many of them rely on fixed time or spray and pray engagement as reminders. Those analog engagement methods can work too, but it creates a different problem. If the reminder or form of engagement is wildly wrong, it gets ignored, it feels irrelevant, it starts to look like spam. So the real question is whether there is a middle ground solution. We believe there is. There are two questions we need to answer. First, when is the best time to re-engage a customer to buy ruck before they become non-compliant? Second, how do we find that moment without hardware feeding us live data? This matters, of course, because our research shows that future drivers may overwhelmingly reject GPS or telematics hardware that would honestly make finding that moment quite easy. In our customer behavior research, only 26% of drivers said they would typically buy ruck well in advance. 62% said they would buy when they were close to running out. Another 12% said they would buy after running out or once they were caught short. That tells us something important. Most future ruck consumers will not be looking to buy ruck early. They are naturally inclined to buy ruck when they feel they need it. So the question now becomes, what does close to running out actually mean? When we tested that statement with future ruck users, the preference window, close to running out, is roughly between 200 kilometers and 20 kilometers remaining. So it appears that future sweet spot will be close enough for the driver to feel the need, but early enough that they can still act before they fall into non-compliance. So the idea is to predict that sweet spot using what data we already have without hardware to give us a live data feed. Is this even possible? I think that everyone in this room has access to CDI, MotoCheck, or some vehicle information equivalent. So in that case, I believe the answer is yes. The license plate becomes our first starting point. From there, we can retrieve the vehicle's WOF odometer history, estimate a daily usage rate, compare that against the ruck balance left on the license, and predict a likely run-out window. The key is that we are not just calculating one odometer gap. We can weigh the estimate against the age of the data, the consistency of previous readings, and broader usage patterns across similar vehicles. We have modeled this across 20,000 synthetic drivers. In those simulations, the engine predicted a driver's run-out date within 10 days of the actual date, 85 to 92% of the time, with a mean prediction error of around 5 to 8 days. For enforcement, that would not be good enough. For re-engagement, we believe it is more than good enough, because we are not using the prediction to issue a penalty. We are using it to decide when to engage a customer with a useful reminder. And if the system can reach a driver inside that 200 to 20 kilometer window, before they are non-compliant, but while the need to buy ruck feels real, then we have a practical way to reduce non-compliance without hardware, GPS, or automatic billing. This engagement solution has been viewed incredibly favorably by the retail sector and is the solution that they are most interested in implementing for the future light vehicle ruck market. Of course, while we can take an engagement-first approach to the non-compliance segment of the market with both the neglectful and the reluctant segments, we have to be realistic that it will not work for everybody. There will always be a segment of the market willing to evade. And I will move through this segment reasonably quickly because I'm just looking at the time, but this is a small niche segment that does need enforcement. In our targeted non-compliance fieldwork, we spent time speaking with people in modified vehicle networks, underground car scenes, and anti-establishment groups who openly talked about ruck as something to evade, exploit, or avoid. This is not a representative sample of New Zealand drivers as a whole. It is a targeted adversarial sample, and some of what we heard should be treated as bravado, but the group does exist, and many of them are motivated and well-educated. This is the deliberate evader driver segment. In our research fieldwork, we saw not only discussions, but also demonstrations around odometer manipulation, dashboard changes, GPS and telematics spoofing, ANPR obstruction, and much more. Some of that is serious, some of it is exaggerated. The important point is that the non-compliance segment is where we believe enforcement belongs, not as the default experience for drivers, not as the basis that the private sector should be expected to operate compliance on, but as the backstop for behavior that is deliberate, repeated, and harmful to revenue integrity. So when we put the three future ruck non-compliance segments together, the compliance response becomes clearer. The neglectful driver needs engagement and timing. The reluctant driver needs trust, control, and transparency. The deliberate evader needs enforcement. The mistake would be to treat all three as the same problem. So I will finish with this. In our view, the best ruck compliance system is not the one that catches the most people after they fail. It is the one that uses engagement and technology to make compliance easier than non-compliance. Our full future ruck consumer expectations research is available on pre-release from today. It is completely free, and we will be publishing it for free to the general public over the coming weeks on our platform, Ruck Hub. For anyone interested, we are happy to share our full research. We have a little booth downstairs by the coffee machine in the exhibition room. We have hard copies, and digital copies are also available. Ngā mihi, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Adam, stay there. Come up and join us on the chair, and the other panelists as well to come up and join us. We've got some great questions coming through. Again, upvote any questions that you'd really like asked. So I'm going to start off with the first question, which is actually aimed at you, for Michael. And what is the biggest concern about time of use charging expressed by councillors?
Probably the lack of public transport options for some people. The perception is that public transport in Auckland isn't quite good enough yet. I have sympathy for that argument, but I think we do need to push against that. Obviously, we can't say much good about public transport now, but once City Rail Link is open, hopefully we will have a good story to tell. And our bus network is up there with the Australian cities at least. We have an improving system, especially for the city centre. We already have half of people going to the city centre on public transport. So we have a good story to tell. We will use some of the revenue, or perhaps close to all the revenue, on improving public transport. So we will hopefully be able to say that public transport is good enough and it's getting better, and it provides alternatives to a lot of the trips that would be caught up in the time of use charging scheme.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question generally, yet it's not aimed at anyone particular, so please feel free to jump in. What are the big unknowns or data gaps that are affecting or will affect decisions related to time of use charging? What are the decision makers' blind spots? I think that might be you again, Michael.
Yeah. Well, if it's time of use specific, one concern I have is our modelling tools aren't trained on time of use charging. We're using the macro strategic model, which is the best strategic travel demand model we've got in Auckland. But it has an AM peak, a PM peak, and an interpeak. It's hard to get the detail that we need, and we've had to divide people into low, medium, and high income to get more willingness to pay information and the like. So, in a sense, we're cutting edge for strategic modelling in New Zealand. We need to learn more, get better, because we don't know exactly how people are going to respond.
I've got a question here for both Lance and Marcus, so you can take turns. Is Q-Free or CAPS interested in being a ruck service provider in New Zealand, or just wants to sell tech to potential suppliers?
That is an excellent question. Obviously, the presentation spoke a lot about Q-Free's technology, but actually what we are looking to offer is a service wrapped around that. Of course, I think last time I spoke in T-Tech26, the question was, how long will those tags last? What's the battery life on them? And we did mention in that presentation 2 to 4 years. That issue is allayed when Q-Free acts as a service provider that doesn't actually necessarily sell on a per unit basis, but rather as a service that provides a necessary support for individuals to install those units, and also to provide replacement units if and when those units deplete in battery life. So it is certainly a service that Q-Free is willing to provide into the ruck sector in Australia, in New Zealand.
Marcus.
Yeah, my uncle actually is a politician in Austria, and once taught me that when being asked a yes or no question, never answer with either yes or no. All jokes aside, we need to explore what opportunities and possibilities we can establish together with the New Zealanders in order to provide either services or just technology. I think that is yet to be explored, and this is one of the reasons why we came here with a rather large team, why they have sent me over here from Europe to evaluate and explore those opportunities together.
Thank you. Actually, I've got a question for Q-Free, which is from me, which I have the right to do as I am the master of the questions here. What's stopping that Q-Free unit getting put in somebody else's vehicle that might be of a slightly different size or different rating for pricing?
Yeah, also a very good question. I think that's probably the same question that can be asked of existing telematics units, with the slight difference that it's, of course, once they're wired into the vehicle, it's just a bit that much harder to take out. With any of these particularly in a solution that's being looked at in New Zealand, where you have multiple different responses or multiple different technologies that can be used for road user charging, you need to have some sort of roadside enforcement. So the idea, of course, is to have some form of roadside enforcement that is cost effective. You don't necessarily want heavy gantries all over the place. There's different ways of doing that, but a video-based solution is one way that you can do that. where there is matching of the license plate with details being held of the vehicle, and of course that data being matched with the data coming out of the unit to determine whether or not that vehicle has actually passed the enforcement point. So you know that is one way that we can ensure compliance.
Thank you. And I've got a couple of questions for you now, Adam. So how does the ruck on rails model work with declining WOF frequency? If new vehicles don't have one for 3 years, which is being proposed, how would you predict when ruck is needed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in that situation, we would probably ask the user to manually enter an odometer reading several times throughout the year, but ultimately we don't believe that we need, in order to engage a customer and to predict roughly when they are running out of ruck, which is the approach that a lot of these app-only models currently, I don't want to name anyone in the market because some of them are our competitors, so no free promotions here, but some of them are basically using a time-based system, so you put in your odometer reading several times throughout the year, and they predict when you're running out of ruck. They just calculate how much you're using per year and send you a reminder. Again, I want to emphasize that that method is an engagement method. We do not consider that it would be suitable as an enforcement approach. It is purely for customer engagement.
And another question here is, do you want to be the ruck service provider, or do you want to just help future ruck service providers?
Well, actually, originally we had no interest in being a ruck service provider. We come from technology and startup background. All of us were involved in Deliver Easy in the startup days, so we did a lot of development stuff for them as they scaled up nationwide. But ultimately, when we started talking to the retail sector, and a lot of our connections from our time at Deliver Easy gave us access to people within the retail sector, they felt that they had been largely overlooked, and it's their words, not mine, but they had been neglected a little bit by the transport industry and had been asked to integrate models that exist in the telematics space into their retail workflows that just didn't work, and they don't have any interest, many of them, in standing up a solution end-to-end. They would much rather sell it alongside any of their other product offerings that they offer, such as mobile phone top-ups, other digital content such as gift cards. So yeah, essentially we do plan to operate as a eRuck provider in the future, just because we have had that demand from the retail sector for a neutral style product that they can just offer at the counter.
Thank you. Another question for Lance. What was the public's appetite in Norway for the Q-Freeze technology following the trials?
The trials that are about to commence and continue over the next couple of years will be focused on using the Q-Freeze unit in those trials, and I think following the results of those trials, we could then compare it against the trials that took place in Denmark, which used a smartphone-based app solution, and you know we'll be able to see the acceptance of that unit and see whether those whether the benefits that Q-Free perceives to exist within the unit are actually appreciated by motorists.
Thank you. Michael, there's a specific question I think aimed at you. What's the impact of charging for inner city motorways on the performance of the Western Ring Road?
Not necessarily good, but it's a complex issue. I mean, whenever you charge one road and not another, obviously you're going to be diverting some traffic from that road from the charged road to the free road. So that's a critical design issue we need to deal with. What happens on parallel routes? Congestion will get worse on some roads. The issue I take hard on is that people have alternatives available. They will have the chance, if they have a high value of time, if they're in a hurry, if they want a reliable journey, they have that option. If they've got more time, they don't want to pay a few bucks, then they'll take the gamble and take the alternate route. Yes, a few roads might get a bit worse, but also we're putting money into public transport and we'll be making other improvements to deal with the diversions. So we hope that in general traffic will be a little bit less than it was before the scheme. So even a lot of the uncharged roads will end up flowing a bit better than before, but that's not going to always be the case.
And whilst you've got the mic, regarding the modelling, how are the shoulders of the peak evaluated to assess shift in demand?
I suppose that's what I was getting at in the answer before. Our models are not really flexible enough for us to get into too much detail there. We essentially focused our modelling on AM and PM peak because that's where the bulk of the congestion is. The models allow some trips to transfer from the peak to the interpeak. And we modelled different price levels to get a gauge on how much that moved the dial in terms of time shifting, but that's one of the issues that we don't have a good understanding of. To some extent, our pricing decisions on the peak price versus shoulder price versus a base charge will be based on gut feel, and we will need a process of review where annually and up early, once the scheme is first established, perhaps a shorter time period, we need to assess the impacts we're having and adjust the times. Now, we can't start a charge at 7 a.m. because we're going to end up with a peak just before 7 a.m. So we need a charge before that. How much less it's going to be than the peak, we don't know. That has to be worked through still.
Thank you. For Marcus, has the software been tested in New Zealand, and what is its current rate of non-detection?
Yeah, this is work in progress. We are currently conducting several POCs around the world with several customers, and we are certainly seeking collaborations also in that field here in New Zealand. So I can't give you any detailed numbers, of course, at the moment. Well, work in progress, yeah.
Thank you. Adam, there's a couple of questions I'll roll into one here. Are you in stealth mode, waiting for legislation changes and frameworks to be implemented? And what is the monetization strategy with your service?
Yeah, absolutely. No, we're not in stealth mode. We operate multiple public platforms. We operate Ruck Hub and Ruck Compare. And our public website, we literally post everything we're doing, all the projects that we've tried and failed. We've published our submission to the Select Committee. We've published the response to the RFI. So no, we're definitely not in stealth mode. Are we waiting for the legislation? Yes, absolutely. Just like everyone else, we are hoping that that goes through as soon as possible. But ultimately, a lot of what we are doing has been funded by particular backers in the payments processing and retail side of it. We've done fundraising rounds before, so we're not necessarily in a hurry either. And just to answer the question on the commercial model of it, it would be a revenue commission style model where essentially we're taking a percentage per transaction and the retailers are taking a percentage per transaction, or a fixed amount per transaction per sale. That would obviously be decided once NZTA come out with more clarity on exactly what the fee structure is going to look like.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions here for kind of Marcus and Lance. If 90% of people are happy to pay $30 for an onboard unit, does this work for your products? And there's a couple of follow-up questions around this again, probing the price of the tag and other systems.
Yeah, very, very, very good question, and one that we're actually asked often, actually. The price is volume-based. It works in similar ways to our the way we sell DSRC toll tags around the world. The prices, the costs certainly reduce as the volume increases. We would expect the tags to be somewhere around the range, I would think, of user expectations. You can't satisfy everyone. I think, you know, if they were looking at, you're looking at paying no more than $10, that could be a struggle. But if it was around $30, it's something that I think that you know, it is certainly within the realms of possibility.
Marcus?
Well, I just can copy that actually. And let me add something though. It does not necessarily mean that the end user has to carry the burden of the end user devices completely on his own, right? So the device might be more expensive or might be less expensive, and quite honestly, I don't know, as I'm not a specialist in that particular field. However, I think what actually matters is that one works out a policy which works for both the municipalities or the government in general, and also the end users. So I believe that, and that also speaks to what you, Michael, said before, I think not calling it a tax just for the sake of avoiding it, calling it a tax, is maybe not enough, as the end user at the end knows that they are to pay for what they have already paid for with their taxes, right? So I think the overall topic is much more complex than just reducing it to the end user devices. That's what I'm trying to say.
It's a very good point, actually. I think if you look at the example of toll tags and taxi drivers, they go through a lot of toll tags because they're frequent users of the tags. In a model where they were expected to pay for those tags each and every time the battery is depleted, then yes, I think that there would be great dissatisfaction amongst that cohort of drivers. But the fact is that the pricing structures are such that it's not always a direct cost to the driver. It can be structured in such a way that where there might be a single upfront cost, or maybe none at all, where the actual cost of the unit is amortized within the service fee, the charge per kilometre.
Yes, on this idea of it being another tax, there's a specific question about this, which will be a good opportunity for you to practice your answer to the general public that we need to bring along on this. Is time of use another tax on the poor? Because those who can afford it can pay. And also, is our public transport good enough to handle the increased usage?
Well, I've answered the public transport one, hopefully. Is it a tax on the poor? Well, it's a tax on motorists. One of the principles of taxation is that you should be charging the people who are benefiting. In my view, all transport is subsidised. It doesn't matter whether you're driving a car, you're catching a bus or train, riding a bicycle, or walking on a footpath. You're generally not paying for the full costs of what you're doing. We want to get a system where people are paying something closer to the full cost of what they're doing in a way that then gives us revenue to improve the system. So demand management results in a better system. How much it's regressive or progressive, well, people can argue, but to a large extent that's about the detail of the design. If we focus the design around areas that are more about high-income employment zones as opposed to high social deprivation areas where it's mainly social trips and low-income people, well, then we're trying to make it a bit more progressive by capturing a bit more of the high-value trips. And that's, of course, where more benefits available, because you do have the high value of time users who see the big value in the congestion reduction. So it's about how good we can get the design. Clearly, no tax is perfect. We will do the best that we can, and I think that's a lot better than other ways of taxing motorists or failing to tax people for the infrastructure they consume.
Michael will follow on that. The best option, reduce the number of cars by 1%. Is that enough?
We'll wait and see. We don't need to change the whole shape of the city. Congestion, it's something you can reduce 10% of trips and you've more than halved your congestion in many circumstances. It's that marginal bit of traffic that does the big damage. So if we can get rid of that marginal damage, and that'll be more than 1%, that 1% was Auckland as a region. And remember, the options I showed you just charged very much inner city parts of it. It might be a 10% reduction in traffic in that central city area, but that will have a very large impact on the level of congestion and an improvement in reliability of travel times.
Just keeping you going there, were we able to learn on the potential benefit of time of use charging from the recent fuel cost crisis?
fuel cost
I was going to
crisis.
say
Current-
recent, I'm not sure it's over yet, but yes.
Well, hopefully we're beyond
Rather
the,
than the one back in the 1970s.
we're beyond the peak of it, hopefully. Look, I'm sure we've learnt a little bit about the elasticity of car driving based on fuel prices, but I see tolling and time of use or ruck as quite different to that. It will have different elasticities. We've also got short-term and long-term issues to deal with. So yes, we will have learnt something. It perhaps is a little bit more acceptance of the notion that, well, we do get benefits when there's less driving. So we will hopefully get a good story out of it, and we will have learnt something about elasticity, but I don't think it's a game changer.
And I've got a kind of final question here for Lance. How does your solution vary from a traditional tag?
Yeah, the main difference is that there is a GPS unit inside that tag. So rather than communicating with just a fixed infrastructure on the road and then identifying the presence of the vehicle as it passes that fixed infrastructure, it has a GPS unit which then is able to track the vehicle as it goes through throughout the country. The main difference, of course, being that data is aggregated and coordinates not sent outside the device. But you know, so what's happening inside the tag is quite different to a traditional tolling tag. But from the end user, it's quite similar. Set and forget, stick it on the windscreen, and then don't worry about it for several years.
And Adam, final question for you. What got you interested in ruck?
So I was previously the operations manager for Deliver Easy in the Otago region, and that sounds like a glorified job, but in reality that's just babysitting driver contractors to do their vehicle compliance. And basically when the news first announced, when the government first announced that these changes were incoming, I just got absolutely bombarded with emails and texts from people about, what does this mean for me? Is this another tax I have to fill out? What do I do? Does it clash with my IR3 form, etc.? So we actually set out to build Ruck Hub originally, which was a free information platform. So when we originally got into the Ruck space, we had no intention of doing anything in the retail sector. We had no intention of becoming an e-Ruck provider. We just wanted to figure out exactly what the changes were and deliver them to people in an easy to understand way through Ruck Hub. We then got sucked into more and more conversations as we started to release this information. We started to get inbound emails from people. Some of our connections that we knew previously from our Deliver Easy days in the retail sector started talking to us. Then we ran into payment providers, banks, etc. And it kind of just cascaded from there. So yeah, to say that we somewhat stumbled into it would be pretty on track. But we're enjoying it so far. And yeah, originally we just wanted to offer information. Now we're here at this event. So yeah.
Great. Thank you. Well, I'd like you to join me in thanking all of our speakers here this afternoon. Really interesting discussion. It'll be very interesting to see what happens at next year's conference and how we've progressed with that, because it's a pretty critical time now. Thank you all very much.